And
Again, I want to thank y'all for sitting through my second speech that I have to give. You too. Thank you. And she asked me, like, why don't you do this with your brother? It's like, because it's personal. It's about prison and the stuff I went through while I was there.
Yeah.
It says, while prison culture has always brought a certain degree of interest to society, it's been the last couple of decades, 20 or 30 years, where what takes place in jails is really just captured the attention of civilization in this country. TV shows, documentaries, and series like 90 Days In bring the prison cell to us. So now you don't have to go to jail to experience it.
Go to jail?
No. And while it feeds our interest for the incarcerated, it only tells whatever story the production is trying to produce. It doesn't tell you the things that really go on behind the fences and walls, and it never seems to show the role that the government plays in the drama. For the sake of accuracy, I only talk about the Texas prison system because that's something I know personally about. As y'all know, I have spent what we'll call a little bit of time in prison. After 12 and a half years, I was recently released. And while I'm not a certified expert in prisons, while I was there, I worked in a bunch of jobs that allowed me a unique access that most inmates don't have. It allowed me to be a part of internal investigations, working for wardens in high security in their offices, running errands for them. And it allowed me to see what happens whenever an officer does something wrong and how the supervisors respond. It also allowed me to see how negligence, the indifference, costs a lot of inmates their life. The first thing I would talk about is the drug epidemic in prison. The irony is that most of the people in prison are there because they're addicted to some type of chemical. I was one of them. Then there are the other people, a lot of who will never go home. They have no hope. So while they're in prison, they have to find something to cope with that fact or the guilt of their crime. A lot of people never use drugs in their life will go to prison and find that it's more readily available there than it is on the street. While I was there, I saw more drugs than I ever did in my whole career as a drug dealer. The problem with this is that the drugs aren't made inside the prisons, and TDC making a showing that they're trying to do something to combat the introduction of contraband stopped inmates from getting mail. Everything has to be digital. The strange thing is after that, more drugs came in. According to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice Emergency Action Center report in 2024, there was absolutely no suspicious mail found, but the drug epidemic is worse than it's ever been. So if the inmates were getting contraband into the prisons was stopped through the drug mail system, and the amount of overdoses, drugs, illegal chemicals being found in the facilities across the state has multiplied, the only other explanation is staff is bringing the drugs and providing it to the inmates. They're walking it through the front doors. According to an April 9th, one example of this It can be found on the TDCJ website. It says, and according to an April 9th article from that website, 7 officers were arrested for attempting to introduce contraband and conspiring to introduce contraband into the Barry Telford unit near Texarkana. This is just one example of officers capitalizing on the despair and addiction of the inmates that they're supposed to be trying to watch and take care of. The other problem that I really ran into a lot while I was in prison was suicide. Suicide has turned into an epidemic in Texas prisons. According to the same report that TDCJ EAC in 2024, there were 64 inmate suicides. There were 63 accidental deaths, which could also be suicides because taking a bunch of pills and dying from that, TDC considers an accidental death. They do this to separate the numbers and make the suicides seem less. What's strange about this report is in 2015, there were 32 suicides. So 9 years, the suicide rate doubled. 11 accidental deaths. What's strange about this report is that in 2015, there were over 1,000 suicide attempts. But in 2024, there were just over 100. The reason for this is something that I witnessed firsthand, and the high-ranking officers, supervisors came down from the wardens in an unofficial manner was that there will be no more attempted suicides on paper. A friend of mine, and I use that word loosely, somebody I knew in prison, Vernon Wells, was in segregation because he had attempted suicide after that practice went into place. Since he was not put on suicide watch because he can't be because he didn't attempt suicide according to the paperwork, he was given a razor one day so he could shave. The following day, while I was talking to him, he took that razor and cut his own throat. I ran down to the sergeant and told her, Sergeant Ellis, the guy in cell 208 just cut his throat. And she tells me, leave me alone, I'm trying to get my count clear. Exactly 1 week later, another inmate who lived directly below where Vernon took his life, who was also in seg for attempting to commit suicide, was given a sheet and he hung himself. This is something that goes on all the time. In the time I was in prison, after COVID, whenever they put the no more suicide attempt policy in place, I saw inmates on the Cofield unit locked up in segregation on a daily basis because they tried to take their own life or harm themselves. But the paperwork doesn't reflect it. In the last couple of years, TDC administration in Huntsville and the Texas Board of Criminal Justice has tried to make moves to combat drug addiction, as well as suicide. They have started to make tear walking programs, which is where inmates walk to tears, positive role model inmates, and they get to talk to people.
Now you can't walk.
They have peer coach programs where guys are able to go in front of the cells and talk about drug programs. And they also have the self-harm team, which are also inmates that'll go to people that have tried to harm themselves and make sure they need anything. Sometimes they just need somebody to talk to. But even with the self-harm, the suicide attempts aren't being documented. They've also implemented things like drug-free incentive housing where inmates have larger TVs, video games, PlayStations, regular couches. But the problem is that Huntsville can do this, but they're not getting a whole lot of cooperation except from the wardens on the unit. The security officers don't care. The ones that watch the inmates and deal with them on a day-to-day basis don't care. Prisons are understaffed, and the common correctional officer simply doesn't care if the inmate gets high. He doesn't care if the inmate kills himself because it's just one less person he has to worry about. They especially don't care about enough to try to intervene because if things get froggy, it might endanger them going home at the end of their shift. So there is no solution that I can think of. They don't get paid much. And it's a horrible job. You deal with the worst people in society. Child molesters, murderers, drug addicts, thieves. I mean, who really cares what happens to them anyway, right? Well, I'm one of those, drug addict, thief, that I took advantage of everybody in my life. And while I was there, I kind of felt the same way. I deserved what I got. But then I started seeing these officers just bringing in drugs and bringing in drugs, and inmates dying left and right. And then they start bringing in drugs that has fentanyl, and now everybody's falling out. So the question is, who's going to police the police? Because as long as officers feel like they can make extra money by getting away with sneaking drugs into prisons, there are guards that will. And as long as inmates don't feel like they have anything to live for, they're going to keep trying to kill themselves. Thank you.